Yeah, hello everyone. Good morning and welcome to this. I will not call it a session, but welcome to this interactive webinar that we are having. It's related to Hibernate and basically Hibernate and JDBC is what we'll be covering today. So, just a brief introduction about myself. I've been working in this software industry for around 12 years. I started my journey with Samsung, then I worked with Snapdeal, then I worked with Cross, and currently I'm working with Microsoft Hyderabad. So again, thank you for having me in, and again, a very warm welcome to each and every one of you for today's session. Today's session actually is a very core session when we talk about software development, because whenever we use any system, the very important thing is data, and the second very important thing is retrieving the data and displaying the data. So this is what the entire fundamental of software industry is built on: data and how you manage the data. So this is what we'll be basically doing a deep dive today on how basically we get the data and what are the different mechanism of doing this, which is preferred, which is not preferred, and all those things is what we'll be covering in today's session. Okay, so let me share the deck. Okay, so this is the deck that we have. So we will basically in today's session, we will be going to see how you can use Java with MySQL using JDBC. I think most of you will be aware of what is a JDBC. Then we'll be covering what are the some limitations that we have for JDBC. Then some Hibernate basics and setup. Then some CRUD operations, and then interview questions that we'll be covering today. So I'll request each and every to be there till last in this session, because there are certain good announcements that will going to happen in the end. And if you be in session, you will understand. If even if you're not aware of JDBC and Hibernate, you need to understand the basics upon which you can then further build your concept. So that's the thing that we want here. Okay, so first of all, Java to MySQL using JCBC. Now, whenever you go and do any of your activities, either you go to Facebook or you go to Instagram or you go to YouTube, the basic thing is you are able to see some content. Either you are able to see the videos or you are able to see the pictures, photos, and all that. The thing is how you are seeing the content, right? That's the very important thing. The important thing is there will be some store, some place where those contents will be present, right? And from that place, you are reading the content. So there are two things that basically happen: a place where the content is there, and a system that will be reading that content. So your Java backend is basically responsible for extracting the content, and your database is basically responsible for preserving the content or having the content. So your Java backend will basically ask the database that, hey, give me this particular videos, or hey, give me this list of images. And your database will give, and similarly, your backend service will show it to you. Now, both of these are hosted in a cloud environment. Your backend service is also hosted in a cloud environment. Your database is also hosted on a cloud environment, and both do interactions. Okay, now let's see how when you picture yourself as a software engineer at Facebook, build a backend service that fetches user data from a SQL database. That's a very high level thing that happens. Now, how will you retrieve data from SQL using the Java application? That's the important thing. Now, most the application not necessarily be in Java, but today the focus is basically on the Java applications. Your application can be in any language. But today, for this particular webinar, we focus that okay, you are having your application in Java, and we're going to use this basically to fetch the data from your database. One of the solution is JDBC. JDBC actually is a very it's something that is been here for quite a long time. It was very ferociously used in the software industry to get the data and all that. Still, it is being into practice. So we'll see what is JDBC. We'll also see to an extent that why nowadays there's a shift from JDBC. What is the reason for the shift? What we are preferring nowadays. So this is what we'll be seeing. So Java, JDBC is Java Database Connectivity. It is a standard Java API for database independent connectivity between the Java programming language and a wide range of databases. So it's not that only MySQL you can connect with JDBC. It depends. You can also use NoSQL databases also. You can also connect them using JDBC. It's just that you have to do some configuration changes. So you can think JDBC as an interface that your Java application will be using to talk to the database. And in the backside, implementation wise, it can be any database, be it be SQL, NoSQL, any database. How JDBC basically works. So there are certain stages that JDBC follows before actually fetching you the data. So very important thing is you have to load the JDBC driver. Then you have to establish connection with your database. So as I mentioned earlier, your database may be hosted in a cloud environment. So to provide the URL and all the location of your database, that okay, where is your database? And then the JDBC will do a DNS lookup. It will then figure out the IP and then it will interact with your database. So establishing connection is the second very important phase. Third phase is create statement. Like the queries basically means you will create a query, what query you want to execute on your database. Maybe like select star, something like that. So this is what is basically your query that you will create. Finally, it will be executed on the database. The result will be processed. It will be sent back to you. And finally, you will close the connection. So each time you want to, perform some query on the database, you have to start a session or a connection, do your job, and then anyone, any question here? Anything, if I have anything on top of your mind, feel free to add in messages, feel free to make it interactive. Okay. So load the MySQL driver. This is something how you load the SQL driver. Then you have to establish the connection, as I told you. So this is after the loading. See this driver manager that get connection. These are internal part of JDBC. So once you get the JDBC driver, you will get this method. So you have to provide the URL of your database. JDBC driver. It will create your basically a connection. Then you use a statement. Statements are basically used to execute the query. In that basically thing, you can provide your query like select something, star from user and all that. This will give you a return. The result is then stored in this RS variable that we're seeing here. Then you iterate through it and get the result finally. And after that, you do connection.close. This is what is your statement. Statement is nothing but you can think it something JDBC provides. It's a name of a class that JDBC provides. And using the object of this class, you basically execute the query on the database. You generate the query, write your query, and finally it get executed on the database. So this is what is basically a statement. Now establishing JDBC connection to your MySQL. This is the JDBC setup we'll be working on. So you will be having a backend thing, and then will be a database. We'll be try to see how a connection is established. So we actually have a replit. I hope you're able to see my screen. So there's a replit. In replit, we have actually written our application. Replit is nothing but you can think something, a code that is hosted on cloud. So if you can see here in the replit, we are making a connection to the database. So you see, we are providing the URL of the database that, okay, this is where my database is hosted. This is the cloud address. This is the username. This is the password. So here you are loading your JDBC, as you can see, connecting, and then finally you are creating a statement, and finally you are executing a query. The executing query is very simple. You are showing all the databases. Now, how we can do it? There's a command. Just run this command. It will execute this. And see, this DB creation is something the DevOps will already do. A DB will be created on a cloud at any location using various things like AWS or something. You can create your database, host it there. And once you create a database on cloud, you will obviously get its location, URL, and everything. And then basically you can use that. So it will be sort of an empty database that will be created, or a cloud storage is there. You can then go ahead and using the queries, you can create the tables there, or you will also get a admin prompt. Basically, you will get a UI basically connected to a database, and using that UI, you can create the tables on your database and do everything. So these things all have become very simple nowadays. You don't have to do much effort to create a database on cloud. You have to just take the licensing, do the payments, get the storage space, your DB is there, you will get the cloud address and everything of a database, and then you can very easily access it. Now let's go to our command prompt and run a command. Uh, so this is basically will be counting. So this command is basically will execute this main.java class that we have just seen. If you just run this command, just a second. Just run this command. So see, it has established a connection with your database and it is printing these database. So these are by default tables that are present in your database. If you can see user, default TB, information underscore schema. So if you create a raw database, by default, there will be some tables that will be created, but those will be default tables. You can go ahead and create your own tables based on your own requirement. But by default, if you get a database, there will be some table to store the initial configurations and all that that will already be present there. And since you are using a username and password, so there will be a user table that will be having details of the user, that okay, who are the authorized users, what are the username, and what are the passwords. So this is how you are getting the details. So here you are basically seeing just it is running this your main.java, and it is just displaying you the list of tables that are present here. This is what this particular command is doing. So it's very simple. Just get the driver, have your database hosted on the cloud, get the URL of the database, and we'll be able to establish a connection with it. Okay, coming back to our application, execute the code to see if you can fetch the list of databases we have on our MySQL server. So this is what it is fetching. Exceptions. Now there can be certain exception that also can happen. So if we go back to our Rapid code, now in this issue on main, see what we are doing here is we are using the URL, username, password, and then we are just trying to again load the basically your JDBC, and then we are trying to make a connection, and again we are running the same program. Same thing we are running to display the list of databases. Same thing we are doing. Now let's run this command. So we just need to change here. Instead of demo one, just do issue one. Now here you are seeing an exception we are getting. The exception that we are getting basically is no database selected. Right. The problem is there was no database. So in case if you try to give some URL and actually there is no database at that particular URL or something, you can get such type of issues with JDBC. Also, if there's some, because see, it's eventually it's on internet, right? It's located on a cloud thing. You have a URL, you'll make a connection. So there can be an issue establishing a connection with the database. So in those cases, with JDBC, you can get this type of exceptions. So this is something which you should be prepared that okay, you can get this type of exceptions. So you have to handle them in the code that okay, I'm making a query. There can be a case that I can get this type of exception. It may not be able to connect to database, even though sometimes the database is there, but there are some network issues. You may find it difficult to connect. So eventually it will throw these exceptions. And your code can break, your backend server can break, right? If it is getting this exception. So these type of handling will be needed for JDBC. Because if you see the two codes, they are more or less very similar. Even the link is similar and everything is similar. But still, if there are some uh, issue with the user or the password is not correct or some connection dispute is happening or something is happening, JDBC instantaneously will give you a exception that okay, the connection could not be established. And then it's your responsibility to handle it. So this is one of the causes that is there, the problem with JDBC. So again, the codes are very simple. Just to establish, run it, and you are seeing the outputs. So you're seeing this exception. Basically, we saw no database exception. Create it cannot do because it is not able to find any database. So it is not able to run the query. Coming to the limitations of JDBC, this is one of the limitations we saw that this type of things can be, can happen very frequently in JDBC. So you need to be aware of these things. Basically, as a developer, you need to make sure that these are properly handled. Now, coming to limitations of JDBC, first challenge is boilerplate code. You want to create another Java class for a different query. What will you do? Write repetitive boilerplate code. So this repetition codes you have to always write. You have to make a connection. You have to create a statement. You have to then, run that query, get the result, pass the result, iterate through the result set, get the results, and finally do whatever handling you need to do. So each time you are creating a new query that involves some new Java class or some new type of data, eventually you have to do the same code again and again. So there will be a lot of repetitive code. And the code is getting repeated so much time, it will be difficult for you to maintain the code also. Right. Same type of code, if you're placing at n number of places in your system, this is not a good part of a design. The more code you write, the more repetition you do, more maintenance effort will be there. For example, see this example, you have to again make a connection, you have to load the driver, you have to again make a connection, you have to create a statement, execute the query, then again take responsibility of closing the connection. If you leave the connection unclosed, then it can also cause issues. Your resource will be remain occupying. The connection is always closed. It can cause a lot of issues. So explicitly you also need to close the connection to your database. So this is one of the disadvantages that happens. Second challenge we have just seen in the example, error handling. There are various types of error that might encounter: connection failures, SQL exceptions. How will you handle the error? Using try catch, you will end up writing code for handling error for each database operation. This is also something you should not do. We see that if there's any interruption in the connection, it will blindly throw you an exception which you need to handle. If you don't handle that exception, your backend will crash. So a proper error handling mechanism needs to be in place if you're using JDBC. Right now, 5 years, 6 years back, JDBC was very extensively used. So people were actually doing this. They were using all these error handling, there were boilerplate scores and all that. So that is why when the issue started cropping up related to maintainability and all that, that is why a need was felt that okay, there should be something that can, somehow help the developers to, mitigate these things, need not to do so much of handling. These are the certain things that you find with the JDBC. Another big challenge is SQL injection. Now, it's not only related to your crashes and connections, but it's also related to your security. Since you are creating a query, for example, see this query, select star from user, where name is some user input. This is a very simple query. Now the hackers can very easily do a SQL injection. If you do where name equal to admin something, you can get more privileges, right? You can get details of admin or something, and you can then use that detail further to, go and query your database and fetch the data and see the some confidential data and all that. The hackers can very easily, go if there's some malicious developer is there, he can very easily go and manipulate the query to inject some SQL query inside a query that will be able to extract confidential information from your database. Because once a connection has been established, one as a user you have been authorized, you can run any query on your DB. So in those cases, SQL injection is one of the very big concern, and that is more or less related to security. So this is also a challenge that was felt with JDBC, because the hackers thinking is always at a very high level. They always think one step ahead, how they can corrupt the data and how they can steal information of the data. So as a developer, you have to always make sure that whatever connections you are making to your database, whenever you are accessing the data, saving the data, it all has to go through very secure channels. If they're not going through secure channels, your data is at risk. And if your data is at risk, of course, your entire backend system is then will be of no use if your data is at risk. This is some of the one of the biggest challenge that it is there in JDBC. Another challenge is object relation mapping. As you see in JDBC, we are just getting a result of the query. The result is not in a form of a Java object or something, right? For example, see this table. This table has an ID, first name, last name, and phone number. Now you triggered a query on this table. For example, select star from this table where last name is anything XYZ. So you are expected to get a particular row with that last name. Of course, if you can get it in the form of a Java object, like you will get it in the form of some object of a class that will be having first name, last name, phone number, etc. In the form of person, you will be very able, very easy for you to use this in your code. Because from DB, you're directly getting the data, and that data is getting mapped into a Java object. You can very easily pass that Java object across your code, and you can very easily use that data. This something is not there with JDBC. As you've seen the example, you get the result in something called RS. We then iterate through that RS and get the result of that query. So that RS will not give you the information in the form of a Java object. It gives some information in the form of a JDBC predefined data set, and in there the query result is there. So you have to go it, parse it, get the result, and do all those. So this mapping is not there with JDBC. Challenge is Java make use of objects. Database contains tables and relation. In order to make our Java capable of using the MySQL data, we need application to carry out object relation mapping. Again, a lot of code to handle. You get the result in RL, then you do a mapping on yourself, convert that into a Java object, and then finally your backend will use that Java object. So this you will be required to do with JDBC, because JDBC doesn't provide this aspect. It will give you the raw query result, and then you have to parse it, apply your business logic, do the computation to finally create a Java object. So these are certain sets of issues that the developer community started finding out, and then there was a need came up that there should be something that should make a life easier. Now what is that makes this life easier? The answer is Hibernate. So with this set of issues that we had with JDBC, the concept of the Hibernate evolved, which takes care of a lot of things here, and it is making the developer's life very easy. And currently, in today's context, Hibernate is very, very much in use. You don't know, because the tech industry is very dynamic. It is changing very rapidly. You don't know, even after 1 year down the line, maybe Hibernate will become obsolete. Maybe something new will come up that will further make things very easy, very optimized, very secure. But till now, at current date, Hibernate is something that is very rarely used for a Java backend system. So Spring is basically used to create a Java backend, and Spring in conjunction with Hibernate is very much used to create a backend system that is interacting with your database. Because with JDBC, we already seen that these are the certain set of issues that we are having. So in order to overcome that issue, there's something called Hibernate that came into picture. Okay, now the question comes is, what is Hibernate? Hibernate is a powerful ORM tool for Java that simplifies database interactions. It's built on top of JDBC APIs. It abstracts the database interactions, enable developers to focus on the business logic rather than the intricacies of database operations. So this is what is a Hibernate. Again, we are here also. It's not that we are completely, moving out of JDBC. JDBC is still there. Still JDBC is there, but we have wrote something on top of JDBC, and that is Hibernate. It's completely built on top of JDBC, means it still uses the features and the power that JDBC has. The only thing is it is now providing you more functionalities on top of it. So this is what basically is your Hibernate. Again, it's a very powerful ORM tool. When we talk about ORM tool, the last problem that we discussed, getting the data from your database and then mapping into a Java object. So ORM is basically object relation mapping. This is something that Hibernate provides. You get the data from database and it will map it to the Java object. You need not to write code for that mapping and passing. This automatically Hibernate will do for you. So see, it's actually a very, very big functionality that Hibernate is providing. A lot of your time, a developer's time that goes into parsing it, converting into object, a lot of issues will come, a lot of errors will come. You have to handle all the cases. What happens if there's an extra field in the output? What happens if there's a missing field in the Java class? All these things will be taken care by Hibernate. It's just that you need to use it judiciously. Another important thing is it abstracts the database interactions. Like each time you are writing the query and all that, basically making a connection, writing a query and all that, JDBC will take care of it. JDBC by default, sorry, not JDBC, Hibernate by default provides a lot of inbuilt queries that you can directly fire. You need not to write statements for that. But if there are certain complex queries, like doing joins and all that, then you can also write your custom code. So it provides both functionality. For a lot of CRUD operations, Hibernate by default has the query. You just need to call them, not even write a single SQL statement. It will execute on the database and give you the result. Everything is abstracted from you. The reason for this abstraction is you need not to worry about the connection in data, just focus on your business logic. Write your code properly, write your logics in an optimized way. That is where your focus should be. See, nowadays, what is happening is the trends in tech industry is changing very fast. They are changing in a very different mode. The mode is that the developer focus should not be going to, understanding the languages, understanding the connections, tools, infra, and all that. The entire energy or the entire bandwidth as a developer should just go in writing proper business logics. Rest, everything will become simplified for you. You yourself can see if you are using Java 6 years back, now if you are using Java now, you yourself with a lot of optimization that has happened, that has made your life very easy with the programming language. Now, why these optimizations are happening? Because your time, your energy, your bandwidth should only go into business logic. Rest everything, leave it to the platforms and leave it to the languages and all that. They will take care of bringing data and everything. But once you get the data, what to do, how to do, that is where your logic should go into. That is why things are changing. Now with AI is coming and all things, there will be, you can expect a lot of things to be happening in 1 or 2 years ahead. Now, how Hibernate works? So as we saw, there was a flow with JDBC. There is a similar fashion we have with Hibernate also. We have to do some configuration. There's a session factory that will be set up. Now, with JDBC, you saw each time we need to create a connection. With Hibernate, this is not the case. Once a session factory is established, it maintains the session, either through maintaining a session pool or something. This is again a different topic, how a session with DB is maintained. Session management is also again a topic in itself, because each time you don't create a connection with DB, because creating connection is again a time-taking process. If your system is something that you need data very quickly, many billions of users are using your system, and for each request, if you're going to make a connection with the database, it will be very latency. There's a lot of latency in your system. It will take time, and also creating connection with DB is a costly operation. It's not easy. Hibernate, what it does something like a session factory. It creates a connection with your database, maintains it it maintains some session storage, and it reuses it whenever a request comes for a interaction with the database. Since it reuses it, the things become fast. Each time it doesn't create a session at all. And whenever you request any query to be executed on the database using that session, it executes that query and it finally gives you the result back. So this is what is the flowchart of the how Hibernate basically works. So a lot of optimizations are done. Session maintaining, again, I can suggest you can have a read. It's a very important concept in your system design also, that how we'll maintain sessions when there are so many databases, so many users. You can't just always create a new session. Also, you cannot always store a session also for a very long time. You have to do some optimized management on DB sessions. Courses involved in this configuration, configure database settings and mappings. You have to tell what is your DB, where it is situated. Mappings means what are the Java classes that will map to the different tables of your database and all. Session factory, and object created once to provide sessions for database operations. Session and object for CRUD operations with the database. So whenever you want to do any CRUD operations like select star, create, update, delete, it will be associated with a session and it will happen. Transaction manages a group of operations as a single unit to ensure data integrity. This is again a very important thing, transaction management. So if you want to you execute, suppose you want to execute more than one or two queries, but you want to ensure that, okay, if any one of the query fails, then roll back all the queries. So that we can do using transaction. So if you specify a transaction and in the transaction you add multiple queries, and if any one of the query fails, the query can fail, right? When executing a query on database, it's not always guaranteed that your query will work. Because again, it's a cloud connection. A lot of things can happen. There can be connection disruption, there can be network partition that can happen. But if you need that, okay, all the queries that I'm executing, each and every query must execute, then only I will mark it as a complete query. Such that if any one query fails, you have to roll back all the queries. That is where transaction come into picture. So transaction takes all queries as an atomic unit, and if anyone fails, none will be executed. Or if some has already been executed, they will be rolled back. In banking system, this is a very vital, because we're dealing with money, you're dealing with consistency. So whenever your system is prioritizing consistency, that there has to be a very consistent data, their transaction comes out very handy and it is very much used. Not I'll say use, it is one of the mechanism only to enforce consistency. So you can think about these things that are some part of your CAP theorem if you are knowing consistency, availability, partition tolerance. So if how you can show this, especially also in banking industry, if you are uh, debiting money from your account, first of all, the money should get subtracted, then it should get re-added. All these things should happen in one transaction, so that if any step fails, nothing should happen. Okay, Hibernate configuration file. So there is an hibernate.cfg.xml that is used for configuring Hibernate. It contains database connections, settings, and other Hibernate properties. So this is how it looks like. You are providing your driver. Driver is nothing but the same as JDBC. Then you are providing the URL of your database. Where is your URL? See, earlier with JDBC, we were reading it from code. Here you can just specify once, and then once a session is created by Hibernate, it will make sure that it interacts with the database, and as a developer, you need not to do anything around that. You mentioned the username, you mentioned the password, see all these things. You can mention in a configuration file, and then Hibernate will use it. It should have a tag, Hibernate dash configuration. That tag needs to be present in the XML. And we need that tag. You just write a session factory. And then inside session factory, you mention these details. Basic component involved in ORM. So ORM, as I told you earlier, is nothing but an object relation mapper. There's something called annotations. There is entity. There is a mapping. This is what basically is certain important thing. For example, take this example. You're seeing a class. Just think as a normal Java class that has the name user. It has 4 attributes: ID, name, email, and phone number. Now think of it as a table. Now in the database, there will be a table user. The table will be having 4 columns. One column will be your primary key ID. Second column will be your name. Third column will be your email, and fourth column will be the phone number. And this is the corresponding Java class of that table. So you have to just give some annotations. For example, @entity. If you give this annotation, Hibernate will understand that, okay, this Java class is mapping to some table. Now, if you get @table, Hibernate will understand that, okay, this Java class is mapping to user table. So whenever I get any data from user table, I will map it to this Java class. Basically, it will provide you an object of this user class with the data set in it. And then you can also specify that, okay, this is the column name for this field. And these are by using @column, because the column name can differ. For example, instead of name, it can be full name in your table, but in your Java class, you want it to be a different parameter. So in that way, you can specify the mapping. So this is how you are telling Hibernate, this is a mapping. This is the corresponding Java class. It will be mapped to this particular table, user table. These are the column names. For these column names, these are the fields in my Java class. This is how you provide the mapping to Hibernate. And then Hibernate, what it will do, whenever it gets result from the user table, if you do select stars from user table, for example, when you get the list of users, it will provide you as a list of this class, object of this class. And becomes very easy for you. You can then simply use it in your code. To see how easy it has made it, it's just that you need to follow certain annotations. So if you're using the Hibernate, if you are involving Hibernate in your project, taking its dependency, like maybe as a POM or jar, whatever you want, by default, these entities will be there in your code. You just need to add them. Hibernate setup. Now this is connecting to MySQL using your Hibernate. So as we saw with the example of JDBC, right? Similarly, we need to do the connections to get a means we need to establish the all the things to connect to your database. So this again will be your backend. Your backend will be talking to a SQL database and such. So there's a demo here. Let's go to the demo part. So this is our demo. There's a user entity. Uh, so this is basically your user class that we just saw. It is mapping to a user table. Now there is a Hibernate util. So this Hibernate util has something called a session factory. It then reads from your configuration files and does everything. That is a file that you need to have. Then this is your main class. So see, very simple code it has become. In your main class, you need not to do all these things that we will doing with JDBC. In your main method, you're just using a method get tables. So in get tables, you're getting the session. And in that session, you are simply passing the query, show tables. And it will give you the result, which you can very easily see. This is how it does. Now, this is your configuration files. You can see here we have maintained everything, that this is the dialect, this is the driver class, This is the URL, this is your username, this is your password. Connection pool is a certain advanced configuration that you can use, at how many connection pools you want and all that. That basically, if you go into Hibernate sessions, deep dive into Hibernate, you will understand these things. But as a part of webinar, we'll just be focusing on the basic aspects. Okay, so go to your shell here. We have already seen these things. And this will be your user entity, this is your util class, and this is your main class. So it is again just asking the database to show the list of tables. So I think there'll be some command that we need to run. So if you go there, uh, we need to first install it, run this project so that it installs. So your build is successful, all the configurations are set up. Now, in order to run that, you just need to run this command. All are part of here. So these commands you can very easily find anywhere. It's a standard thing. So I think there's some problem with the code. That is why it is not giving me the list of database. Maybe some connection issue happened, but this is how you're going to run it. So if you see currently it is, see this is your table. It has given the result. See, this is how your user table is actually. In the database, it has given you the detail that, okay, this is your user table, how it looks like. It has an ID that is of type bigint. It has an email that is of type varchar. Then it has name that is of type varchar, and it has a primary key that is your ID. So see, this is how your table is actually present in the database. So this, but I think there's some issue happening. So it is not giving you the list of tables, but ideally this is how it will return you the list of tables that are there. Okay, coming back here. So if you run show tables, it should ideally give you a list of tables. It looks like say some connection issue because both are hosted in cloud itself. So it is not giving me the tables. Now coming to CRUD operations. CRUD operations using Hibernate. Create operation. It because so CRUD is C is create. Anyone, what is the full form of CRUD? What is this? CRUD stands for CRUD operations. So people are confused. What is R? Some is saying read, some is saying remove, some is saying retrieve. So what is CRUD? It's very simple. CRUD operations means basic operation that you do on a data. What are the very basic operations you do on a data? You create a data, so C stands for create. You read a data, so R stands for read. You update a data, you can update a data, right? U stands for update. And then you delete a data, so D stands for delete. A very basic operation that you do on your data are known as CRUD operations. Create, read, update, delete. There is nothing like remove. Read and retrieve, you can think it of as synonyms, but yeah, generally it's read. Okay, creating a new records in one. So this is how you can create a new record. You create an object of a user class in Java, set the name, set the email, whatever you want. get the session. Hibernate will provide you the session. From the session, get a transaction, save, call dot save, provide that Java object, do commit, it will run on the database. You need not to write a single SQL statement like insert into DB where name equal to John Doe and email ID equal to john.doe at the example.com. You need not to do anything. Just call the same method that is provided by the Hibernate session. Because I told you earlier, Hibernate provides inbuilt functionality to execute the CRUD operations. This will go and save it in your database. See the amount of work that got reduced. And also you are passing a Java object because user is already mapped to user table. We have seen it. Just create an object of user table, provide the values that you want to save to this object using setter, or even you can use constructor. Both are fine. Then pass it to your session. Call the same method and the same method. Pass the new user. It will get saved. The only thing is your Java class needs to be a POJO object. Just fill the details to the object, pass it to the Hibernate session. It will do the job for you. See the amount of boilerplate code that has reduced. This is the important thing. Session.save. Now there's something called JPA. I think it's not part of the session, but I'm just giving you for a hint. JPA is something that is part of Spring Data. If you're using Spring Data, even you not to use this session and transaction and all, you just can directly call this same method and pass the Java object. But again, that comes as a part of Spring. Spring Data even provides this functionality that, okay, creating session, creating transaction that is not needed. You can directly call the same method. They provide a way of doing that. So even more of your job is reduced there. But that is part of Spring Data. Spring Data uses this Hibernate, and on top of it, it has JPA that provides certain interfaces which Hibernate implements. So this is again a different topic. You can go and read it. Or crio has very good defined sessions there to understand these things. So JP again will make your job further easy if you're using Spring Data to get this execute these queries. Even you don't have to do any of this session transaction, close, commit, nothing you need to do. You just call dot save. They provide a mechanism. Just call dot save, pass your Java object, it will save it. I think the demo, I think the Java is not working right now. So I don't know if this demo will be helpful. But let me try once if it works well and good. So let me open the repo. So here is your code. So if you go into main, your entity is again the user class. You have a util. This util is creating session and all that. Then you have a main file. So in main file, I think code is more or less same here. Okay, so what we can do here is we can just comment this get tables. You can comment out this is not needed. Okay, let me fork it. So for Replit, you always need to fork because in the fork only you can edit it. So Replit is an online platform tool. If you are not aware, you can write your Java programs there. It's basically hosted on cloud, and you can use it to write your Java files and all. Okay, so go to our code again, Java crio. Go to your main file. We don't want to get tables, right? We need to create a user. Now on connect this one. So we are creating a user object here, and now we will be saving it. This much code is only needed. Get a session, a transaction, and then just save it. This is what we will be doing. Okay. So now go to your shell. So I think first we need to build this code. So I think command will be here. This command are you will get everything. So it's nothing new. So just go and build your project first. Now it has built it. So let's again run. I think if there's no issue, means in terms of connection and all, it should run. But last time we encountered an issue. So yeah. So see what it did. User saved. So you are printing a message here. User saved, right? After the saving is done, and you are getting this message here. User saved. So Hibernate has basically used this table. It is showing you in logs, and it has run this command. So see, Hibernate internally has created a SQL command. Insert into users email name ID where this the question mark is the value that you have provided in your Java class, and it has saved into a database. See how easily it did that. Now let's read the same thing. We have already saved it in your database. Or I think let's save and read. Do this together. Just uncomment this. So see what here is doing. It is now creating a session. It is now from user. Just mention the table name. That okay, from user it has to read it, and it will get the list of users that is provided in DB as a list of this user object only. So it maps the output of your table into this user object. Since there can be more than one user in the table, we are getting a list, and then you can just iterate through this list and print the details. So this part of Hibernate actually does the ORM thing, maps the output from the database into your Java object as a list. So in the create query, you just need to uh, do from user. In the quotes means okay, it has to read from user, and you have to provide the class that okay, now map the result to this user class, the user Java class, and return me as a list. Now build it again. Now run it. See, you are getting the output here as a Pojo. ID is this, name is this, email is this. So how easily you are able to provide the output and get the output. Similarly for updates also, if you see for update also, they have provided a method dot update. Create your Pojo class, do update, provide the updated value, call this update, pass your Java Pojo. Hibernate will update that particular entry. Similarly for delete also, create your Pojo, pass that Pojo to the delete operation of Hibernate. Hibernate will delete that entry. So this is how what Hibernate does. And it's so simple. See, your activity, you're playing with the database in such a simple manner, and you are getting the outputs and everything in Java class. Now this users, it has list of all the users. You can very easily pass it to your other Java classes, and you can apply your business logic. So this is what basically Hibernate does. Okay, coming back to the PPT, because we have a time constraint also. We decided for a 1 hour too. So this is the basic, because the idea is to give a basic understanding. We can again go and we did creation, we did read operation. So this is the basic thing for read operation. From user, specify the table name and which mapping you want, which class to be mapped to the result. You specify there. Hibernate will do it for you. There was again a demo. Update is also the same. You have to just create the user that you need to update, and you can do like this and just call that update method with that particular user object, and it will update it. So if you want to update a particular user with a particular ID, you have to tell the session that, okay, get me that user with ID 1. Now you update the field in that user again, and then you finally call update again, and it will update that. Very simple. Just a normal logic is there now. There is nothing specific to database and all. Hibernate makes it very much friendly with Java. Similarly, delete, get the object you want to delete, what ID, user ID you want to delete, use session.get, session will bring you that, then simply call delete. Interview questions, Hibernate again, if you're going for a backend development jobs or applying for positions that require Java backend developer, expect questions from Hibernate. For example, what is Hibernate? Why it is used? Anyone, what is Hibernate? Why it is used? Feel free to add in chat. Feel free to discuss. It's a very common interview question that is asked. And explain the concept of session in Hibernate. This is something they can ask, that what is a session in Hibernate? You can very well say that Hibernate maintains the session internally, and this session is nothing but the query that we execute. So each query is associated with a session, as we have seen. So whenever we need to execute a query on the database, we need to have a session object. So the query will be part of that session object, and it will get executed into your database. Hibernate does session management and everything. Hibernate is an ORM tool, right? So this is how you need to frame your answers. This is an ORM tool. It is an optimization on top of JDBC. It helps you do operations with databases. A lot of boilerplate code is removed. CRUD operations, it by default provides the CRUD operations internally. You need to write query for that and all. These are the certain things you can say. And why it is used? Very easy to use. It provides relation mapping, and all those things are the reasons. Again, these are domain related questions. If domain related questions are asked in an interview, interviewers will be expecting certain points or certain answers that should be part of your answer, like ORM mapping, ease of doing ORM mapping. It has sessions, no need to write CRUD operations. These things are certain that the interview will expect from your answer. If they are not in your answers, then it may not go in a correct way. But since these are very straightforward and dominated questions, certain things interview will have in the mind that, okay, the candidate must speak out these words. Sessions we have already covered. So these are certain things. Now, how does Hibernate handle transaction management? What are the named queries in Hibernate? Why they're useful? Explain the difference between save or update. What are the different types of caching in Hibernate? So these are again some very good questions related to Hibernate. That of course the crio is here to help you out if you want to go and dive into Hibernate. Okay, folks, thank you then. It was a great having an interactive sessions with you all. Continue with the journey of learning, and the crio team is always there to help you out. So thank you all, and all the best for your future. Thank you.